In this video, I'm going to explain exactly why I stopped watching Dr. Mike Israetel and why you probably should too. And I just want to say before I start, there's no shade being thrown of any kind. This is purely just me presenting my logical arguments. Now, I used to be super skinny. I used to weigh under 90 pounds, about 80 pounds, I think, when I started working out. And people would always make fun of me and stuff. They would say things like, I could snap your arm in half easily. Or, they would say do your parents even feed you, right? So I really wanted to get bigger because I was so skinny. And I just started in my room with the bare minimum, just a few dumbbells, nothing much to be honest, some push-ups, and then I started to progress things a bit more, and actually I wanted to learn how to improve my training to make more gains, right? And then I eventually stumbled upon the Renaissance Periodization YouTube channel and Dr. Mike Israetel, right? And I was just mind blown at all this complex new information that I could learn, right? Because I'm kind of like a nerd, honestly, like a analytical, logical type of thinker. So I really I just went straight into it. And on that channel, there's a playlist called, I'm pretty sure, Advanced Hypertrophy Concepts and Tools. And it's like a playlist of 30 videos, probably hour long each, of just advanced random stuff. And I watched that whole playlist, every single video, twice through. Not once, but twice. I honestly thought that was the pinnacle of training. That was the most optimal way to do everything, right? And obviously there's definitely some value in all that stuff, but it's not really what it seems to be. And I just want to point out a few things about Dr. Mike Israetel's training and his sort of training philosophies that might not be the best and definitely have some big flaws. Now, I've gained roughly over 40 pounds since I started working out, and I've gone to a pretty aesthetic physique, and I'm still going. I actually just got back from a push workout. But yeah, I've sort of learned my lessons along the way. And yeah, I used to be super obsessed with Dr. Mike Israetel, and now I've realized the flaws in his training. So the first thing I want to point out is that Dr. Mike Israetel uses a super deep range of motion on everything and always uses excessive range of motion. He always talks about the stretch, right? But the thing is, a lot of the times, he's using sort of an orientation strategy and taking tension off the muscles, sort of like cheating to get that range of motion, which makes it completely unnecessary because you can get a full stretch on the muscle without going super deep like he does. Because at that point, it's the range of motion's coming from other places, not actually the muscle. Perfect example of this is on any kind of press, right? Like a dumbbell press, incline dumbbell press, for example. He goes super deep, flares his ribs, arch your back, all that stuff. And that's just leading to actually less tension on the pecs. And that's just excessive range of motion. And I used to do that a ton. I used to flare my ribs, arch like crazy on all my pressing, and I suffered the consequences. I got super compressed, had pain, no chest soreness or no chest gains. Another example could be any kind of a row where he kind of at the bottom to get a full deep stretch, right? Kind of rounds his back, and that's just coming from spinal flexion instead of scapular protraction, which is what you want for the traps to stretch them out fully. So when you're doing a row, you shouldn't round your back as you're going to the bottom of the row, right? You should just protract your shoulders, and that gets a full stretch on your mid traps, etc. But you don't need to round your back and go all the way down. And it kind of makes sense in your head at first, and it did for me. I thought, stretch me to hypertrophy, right? More tension in the stretch, go all the way down. But then it's kind of you're actually getting less tension on the muscle, even though you're trying to get a deeper stretch and put more tension on it. Another big thing about his exercise technique in general is he just uses a lot of orientation. For example, a lateral raise. Instead of just moving his arm, right, he kind of flares his rib cage and arches his back a lot. And that's putting way less tension on the side delts. And that reflects in his physique. It's not genetics why he looks the way he does. And his spinal erectors and traps and stuff are very well developed because when you're doing the lateral raise that way, then you're putting more tension on those muscles instead of the side delt. I mean, training the way he does just leads to an unaesthetic physique because you're just compressing everywhere. And like I said, it's probably not, it's genetics. And also, when you're getting so compressed, that can lead to a lot of pain and injuries and stuff, which he does kind of have. And I've definitely experienced this when I used to train the way he did. I would just get super compressed. I had pain on in my upper back, right? And also another thing is you lose range of motion, which is was a big problem for me. My left shoulder had way less external rotation than my right, and I mean both of them just had poor shoulder mobility. And also you can see this with Dr. Mike Israetel. When he squats, he has to use these straps on the bar because he can't reach the bar. And you know what his excuse is? Oh, my biceps are too big. That's not the reason. It's because you're compressed in your upper back, which is dorsal rostral, basically. The next thing that I have an issue with is kind of his progression model, like progressive overload, right? Because he promotes a very like pre-calculated sort of system to just like add a rep every week or every workout or whatever, right? And this can kind of lead to like progressive overload anxiety and kind of obsessing over the numbers too much. But you got to realize that hypertrophy causes progressive overload, not the other way around. So what you should be training for in the gym is to actually stimulate the muscle growth if that's what you're training for, not to get the numbers. The numbers will come as a result. And so when you're always obsessed about having to add a rep or having to add a weight every single time, then this can lead to a lot of just cheating and orienting and using bad form to get the extra rep because it's like your life depends on it. Like you really want that extra rep. Otherwise, in your head, you think, oh, I'm not like growing from this. I'm not making progress. This used to happen to me a ton. Like I would be so obsessed with adding a rep every single time. And then after a few weeks, like I would look at my form and it would just be so much different and worse than before because I was just trying to add reps like way too much. Okay, so let's say you're doing a set of 10 to failure, right? And then next time, if you have gained the strength required to do 11 reps, right, from the correlated hypertrophy, then you will be able to do the 11 reps and you'll get the 11th rep if you're going to failure. So it's like predetermined kind of. Like if you're strong enough to add that rep or add that weight, then you'll be able to do it, but you can't force it. You can't try to artificially progressive overload. Also, his system doesn't really take into account fluctuations in strength. Just like your body weight, one day it's higher, one day it's lower. It kind of fluctuates. I mean, what if you got terrible sleep one day, stress, like there's so many variables that could affect it. But if you're doing, his way, then let's say one day you fail to add the rep, maybe you even get 2 reps less than usual. Well, then now we've gotta scrap everything, gotta deload, you're too fatigued, it's over. And that leads into another point, which is like overly being worried about fatigue, stimulus to fatigue ratio, and also just like deloading really often and really like pre-planned deloads. Because honestly, you don't need to deload that often. And a lot of the times, life will kind of force you to deload. What if you just get sick and then you got deload, right? Honestly, probably like once every 6 months, a few times a year, that's probably enough. Especially if you're starting out like really skinny like I did, then you're just not going to be generating a lot of fatigue whatsoever. So it's really just not something to worry about that much for now. And also about the whole stimulus to fatigue ratio thing, which he hypes up quite a bit. I mean, yeah, like it's a thing, yeah, but I would say it's just too like overemphasized. Like it's not that big of a deal. As long as you're targeting the muscle you want effectively, then I wouldn't worry about the fatigue side that much. Now, the thing is, like, you can think about like a deadlift. That is high fatigue, right? But I wouldn't really consider that like an aesthetic focused exercise. I mean, it's kind of just your lower back, right? So I wouldn't count that one. But if you're doing like a bicep curl where the only thing that could be working is your bicep, or like a preacher curl, then I wouldn't worry about the fatigue side at all because all that is just going to your biceps, and the fatigue is going to be minimal at the end of the day. And also with the example of the deadlift, like if you just do a Romanian deadlift, then that's a lot more stimulus to your hamstrings and your glutes, especially if you're doing it right with more like internal rotation. Then I wouldn't really worry about the fatigue too much. The third thing that I want to point out is lack of intensity, and I mean relative intensity. So he's just not going to failure.
Well, you got 20.
What the fuck? If I'm known for anything on the internet,
Dude, you're known for going to failure, man.
I'm known for quitting early.
There's a big emphasis on RIR training, so training a few reps away from failure, and he sort of like progressively overloads RIR. So over a few weeks, before a deload, like mesocycle he calls it, you're basically like you're starting at like 3 RIR, so like leaving 3 reps in the tank, for example, and like slowly moving 2, 1, 0, and then like to failure. But I don't think you should really progressively overload relative intensity because it's, first of all, it's a very small window, and then once you get to failure, you kind of have to reset it. So there's not much potential there in the long term, obviously. And also the fact that he trains with RIRs that are not very high kind of makes it so you need all this like complicated progression stuff. Because like I said before, if you're training to failure, then that hypertrophy will cause the progressive overload to kind of like take care of itself. Like I still think you should track your workouts and stuff, but definitely be training close to failure. And the last thing I want to touch on is just all the overcomplicating kind of that most people would say, like, this is overcomplicating it. Just lift, bro. I don't like that advice, obviously, but I mean, I think there's a lot of value in a lot of the stuff he does. Obviously, I learned a lot from him, but like I just think there's a lot of major flaws and a lot of sort of important aspects that aren't touched on much or aren't touched on at all. But like I definitely think it's good to consider, what you can improve in your training. That's obviously going to be a good thing. Like I wouldn't say just lift, bro. That's stupid. Like if there's ways you can improve your training to make more gains, then I mean that's great. But it's just kind of easy sometimes to get carried away with random complicated stuff that's maybe not as important as something else. And once again, I just want to say nothing personal toward Dr. Mike or Renaissance Periodization whatsoever. I'm just using them to sort of give my points. Yeah, that's it for this video. Have a good one.